Welcome back to Megaphone Rugby. And yeah, today, back by popular demand, very popular demand actually, our good friend Gronje Sochi, and I'm never sure whether I pronounce that surname correctly. Gronje is going to help me interview our special guest today, Franco Smit. Before we get to Franco, welcome Gronje. Are you ready for this?
Baie dankie. Ek is lekker opgewonde vandag. I'm really excited to chat to Franco because I find him fascinating. He's a Soti, I think, like me at this stage now. He's been so long gone and he's Afrikaans and tussen hier and daar. So I think it's going to be fascinating and I'm very excited.
Well, you're the opposite of him. You came from the north down to South Africa and you've learned some Afrikaans. He started as Afrikaans, but now he's up north. So I thought, the perfect juxtaposition. So I'm going to leave it to you because there's a very special, touching point between you and Franco, sharing something in common that you didn't know, either of you, until well, he didn't know until just now. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so hi Franco, first of all. Aangename kennis.
Oh, I'm pleased to meet you. I wouldn't say that my English teacher at school will be very happy with my tenses at the moment. It has improved, but I'm not can't clarify myself as a Soti yet.
We'll decide that. What I wanted to talk to you about is most people who know the show know at this point that I'm from Galway. I'm a Connacht woman, and how I ended up meeting MV and Harry was because it was Biggie Quat after Connacht went to the Stormers and beat the Stormers in Cape Town, and I wrote in to complain about the analysis, and then I was invited on the show, and here we are. But there is a man who's joined at the hip with you every Saturday, and that is Nigel Carolan. He's a Galway man, born and bred like me. And the funny connection is that not only are we both from Galway, but he played out half for my husband in Corinthians for a year as well. He was already in the academy, he was already working his way up, but he ended up playing for my husband Leon in Corinthians in Galway for a year.
Yeah, look, Nigel keeps that part of his game quite tight and close to himself, So yeah, it's good to know. We're very similar minded, and he's my right hand man there at the Warriors. We get along really well. He's and I must say that's one thing of notice when I get to Galway is his heart and soul invested in people more than in the game, and that is what we're about. I'm all about the person and not so much about the rugby side of things, and he's joined up so nicely from that perspective. Different cultures, born in different stages and eras, and we share that similar passion for player development, growth. Execution and performance, and in the same time, coaching the person rather than the player. So yeah, it's good to hear, and I will definitely, he is definitely, when I don't look silently, rooting for Connacht in every game during the season. So a top man. His parents have just live across the Connacht Hotel, so whenever we get there, he jumps across and go and see them. So no, fantastic to hear that there's a connection from that perspective.
Yes, and the other thing Leon said was obviously he was still from the academy at the time, and he was as exactly what you said, working with people, developing people, bringing them on, making them better. But he said he was amazing at fines meetings as well. That he's a great guy in terms of what we call the crack that goes on around the game as well.
Yeah, no, that was also the first word I learned there. What's the crack? So yeah, he was somebody that reminds me. But Franco, what's the crack tonight? So yeah, no, he's a very jovial guy and a real good person to have, not just in the coaching group, but just in the off the field environment as well.
So now that we're talking about Connacht and Glasgow, and obviously you were top of the log in the URC, we scraped in at number 8 at the end, and it's Stuart Lancaster's first year in charge, and you were there a while. And I was there in February at the Dexcom when Connacht stole that win in the end. And I looked back up, where you are in the stand in the Dexcom, you're right beside the spectators. And I looked up and I saw your face. And Nigel obviously has a very good poker face as well, because you could not tell that he was secretly loving Connacht's win or anything like that, because he's a professional. But what struck me and has struck me every time I've watched the two teams play recently is the similarity in styles.
Oh, look, I must say, that I would start by saying Connacht's tenacity is something that stands out. They stay in the fight all the time. They're honest people, they're honest in what they do, nothing flashy. The type of players that they've contracted is hard-working, blue-collar people, and that's similar to what we've got at Glasgow. So it wouldn't surprise me that people from the outside could see the similarities. I think our resources, both these unions have different, or these clubs have different resources. We're not financially that healthy or wealthy in comparison to what other clubs are about. But the good people, and the idea that, again, good people make good players is our mission, and the good people, again, in both environments. I think Stewart coaches a very similar way. I think Stewart's a little bit more on the defensive side of things. I think John Muldoon as the scrum and lineout operator is very good. I've been coaching against him for quite a while before even, and he's very well drilled, very well organized, always up for a plan, and so very, very similarities. But I think I've got a lot of respect for the Connacht people and the durability, and they're in for a fight. When I saw that we drew them in the round, the quarterfinals, I was actually wouldn't say disappointed, but I knew we were up for a big fight, and they brought that. I think Ken Prendergast as a leader there shows and proves to everybody that what he's representing and how he's going to represent that, and then with a well-organized coaching group, they're a very hard team to play against.
I see Cian Prendergast as an Ireland captain in the future. I don't know what you think about that, precisely because of what you're talking about, that tenacity and that honest way of playing as well. I think Connacht were always very good, and I wouldn't say flashy, but their running rugby was lovely, and their attacking rugby, but defensively they were porous. And I think since Stuart came in, even though, as you said, he's on the other side mostly, but I think he's holistic like you. I think he takes a rounded view of the whole game. There are no silos. Everybody should know what everybody's job is so that everybody can pitch in. But I think what Connacht are bringing forward, I agree with you, they don't have a lot of flashy private school players, we'll say, but it's a hard-working team. It's almost like an old-fashioned vibe to it. And we're very proud of that in the West, because Connacht was nearly put to sleep a few years ago by the IRFU.
They should be, and they just signed a very good fly-off. Now I think Frawley will come and play fly-off there. I think they are bolstering themselves up there, and I think, again, hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard, and they are evident of that.
Talk to me about hard work then, as coming from where you came from, making your debut in 97, when there was a lot of changeover from amateur into professional era. And I always get the feeling from talking to people here in South Africa that, rugby is instinctive. It's something you grew up playing. You don't even wear shoes for the first 7 years that you play rugby. And it's literally in your blood. And hard work is just a part of that. You don't expect to succeed just because you've been given a nice pair of shiny boots. Talk to me about the culture of hard work and communicating with younger players now who are maybe millennials and even into Gen Z who might have a different attitude to hard work. How do you communicate that with them?
Look, first, I think South Africans, are brought up with a mission, and that's to play rugby. The pressure at school, I just heard at the Grey College under-9 game last year, there were 3,000 people. There's a lot of pressure that comes with it. And I think we talk a lot about hard work, and it's not just that. I think the drive, the determination, the hunger to succeed, but also how to handle pressure, from an early age, allow these athletes to develop a different mindset. Development is very important first, and then the South Africans are born a little bit bigger, and they are a little bit stronger, more, and they measure themselves against each other from a young age, from a physicality perspective. So the physical development for me obviously is very important. That leads to a different technical development. For years, South Africa just tried to run over everybody that is in front of them, but I think there's enough skill set now in front of contact, and to make them a very prolific team with very prolific athletes. They can, good skill set and And that, from a kicking game, the ball flies so nice and far there. From a young age, they kick the ball just further than everybody else because of the height above sea level in most of the cases. But even at sea level in Cape Town and Durban, the weather is good enough for the ball to be warm enough and it travels further. And, it just allows them to develop a complete all-round game. Good set piece forwards. I think the height of the players are well renowned. The whole of Japan are playing with them. The whole of the world has picked all these tall players from South Africa. So yes, hard work, physical development. Yes, that plays a role. But then I think the most important part about South African rugby players is the fact that they are mentally tough because they grow up in these pressure environments. They play high. Very important. Every game in South Africa is important. It's not even if you play in the D or in the E team at the school, it's an important game. There's a lot to be said by parents afterwards, and I think as most parents are, the older they get, the better they were as players. So they start putting pressure on everybody, to bring out the best performance, and so they are challenged. But I think there's the most important ingredient is the ingredient of faith. I think the South African people and most departments are still measuring themselves to a higher power, and they do not want to misuse that opportunities that's been given to them through the grace of the Lord. So, with all of those ingredients in in player development, it's natural that these guys will come out on top. The inter-school competitions. My sons both. I took them back in 2013 from Italy to go and experience South African schoolboy rugby. And, you get tears as a spectator, as a fellow rugby person, if you can see the quality of the play that they deliver, how well they coach, how much investment has gone into them, and the passion that comes with that. So, it's an unfair environment to the rest of the world, I think.
I agree.
Because we bring through so much quality players and the passion and the growth. I mean, even the football countries. I mean, in Glasgow now, obviously it's Rangers and Celtic, and I can see the battle there between the football teams and everybody can kick and ball, and the way they develop their players, and you'll have your countries that's got different interests, but South Africa obviously is that is the main strength at the moment, is the product that they developed there from a young age.
Franco, you picked up something there. You said in 2013 you brought your sons back to South Africa. Was that why you came back, to let them play schools rugby? I mean, you went back to the Cheetahs and Shimlas and everything.
Yeah, that was right. For the start of the 2013-14 season, I already announced that I will not extend my contract with Benetton after having been there for 7 years. It was to allow them to get the right next guy in place, first of all. And it was allowing me to, to give my children a chance to go back to South Africa. Franco Jr. was then going to grade 8. He was going to go to for his first year, and then the club was, halfway through the season in 2013, and to be exact, the 24th of December. We agreed that they found somebody else. We've agreed that we're not going to win the European Cup or Heineken Cup back then. We're not going to necessarily play in the semi-finals of the Pro 12 back in the day. So they agreed to let me go so that my son could have started school from January. And to get into a place like Grey College as an unknown, haven't played junior school rugby in South Africa, was already a big challenge, and a big step up for both my sons. The younger one was still, he was 11 or 12 years old back then, but he fortunately had a little bit more time to settle in. Yeah, so that was the main mission, and maybe also the reason. 2018, when Larassi asked me to move to Cape Town, it was my son's matric year in Grey College, and I've spent too much time through rugby away from my family, and at that stage I thought it was the best thing to rather stay in Bloemfontein, coach the Cheetahs, and then to continue with the Springboks, and a year later they won the World Cup. So it was a indifferent decision in the end.
I've made career decisions as well for my family, and while you can see that you are shooting yourself in the foot in some sense, you're doing it for the right reason. So I don't think you ever really regret that, do you?
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. I think I believe in obviously I'm a believer and I believe in the Lord. And He's paved my path, with things that I can't control. And I think that was just another make the right decision and to make sure that I do the right thing rather than the popular thing.
Can I ask you another question as well, Franco? I'm very interested in the fact that you brought the boys back when they were just coming into their teenage years, which are formative years, back to your own culture, back to your own language, back to your own land. And it strikes me that there's also a particular type of masculinity that comes from South Africa, particularly Afrikaans culture. And I'm living with it. And it's quite striking. It's almost like an old-fashioned masculinity. When I started dating my now husband, I called him Rhett Butler for a long time because I wasn't used to door opening or chairs being pulled out for me or, just chivalry, I suppose. But also there's that part of the culture in South Africa where you yacht, you can braai, you can carry yourself in a way, you can, I'm not saying that you do it, but as a generalization, men in South Africa are raised in a very different way to the way people are in Europe. We're quite far removed from, many of them, not all of them, from where food comes from. How to butcher an animal, how to cook it, how to skin it, how to live rough if you really, really had to. And I'm just asking, is there a part of that you wanted to give your sons as well, that ability to defend themselves, to embody that spirit of Afrikaans, South African manhood that you're just not going to find in the north of Italy?
Yeah, look, that was part of it. I think we brought our kids up Afrikaans, and I think we traveled enough to South Africa for them to know the difference, So, yes, can't say that was the main objective. I think we've got a good balance from culture in our home, and we had that. I grew up in Bloemfontein, so my parents were teachers, and so it was easy to to adjust their way of thinking and my son's way and my daughter's way of thinking and the way they approach life with that. They've all shot the buck. They've all been out there doing the South African thing. And that period that I went back obviously allowed us to do all of that. But I grew up on a farm in South Africa, so it's easy for them to still relate. And in our home specifically, it was never about bringing them back for a specific cultural reason or to grow or to develop. They naturally had that part, I thought. But it did challenge me, obviously, back in Europe to bring that approach from South Africa into the Northern Hemisphere cultures. It's different languages. I have worked with Aborigines and I worked with Maoris and Fijians. I've had even a Portuguese guy playing a Benetton when I was back here. I literally, I've worked with English people. I've worked with now Scots. I've worked with Irish people. I've worked with all the basically with all the cultures now, and it is not the easiest thing to impose a specific way of the way we can easily impose in South Africa. The team talks in South Africa is obviously slightly different than what we do or what needs to be done, to get the best from people. So, yeah, I think from that perspective, it's the thing that intrigued me most here. I think Frans Ludeke will probably say the same about the Japanese, where he's at the moment. So, it does intrigue me a lot, and it allowed me to broaden my experience and also my understanding of working with people. And now in that I'm in all the different environments, I think the South African ingredient was so important because it comes back down to hard work and not appreciating what you've got every day and the privilege to do what you do. So it's easy to hold them responsible. And so again, I think a lot of that culture is part of my my approach. I again, like you said, as a player, I came through from an amateur side. A lot of the amateur stuff stayed in my playing career, and until we became really professional, I think after the 2000s, that first part was more, people that got paid for things to do thing that they really like to do it. I think it was absolute benefit to getting a salary to be able to do it full time. But professionalism obviously grown from there, and it's a similar ingredient now. As amateurism took me into professional sport, my heritage obviously got challenged in the way I bring across a message every week in the Northern Hemisphere.
Franco, just a couple of questions. Firstly, where are you? I forgot to ask you right in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm currently in Italy. I kept my home here. When I left in 2022 for Glasgow, after Glasgow, I knew my son. I knew Franco was going to marry this Italian girl, and I was hoping, to see my grandchildren one day. I would probably have to come here. And we love Italy. We've embraced the culture. We've already lived here before that for a long time, so 10 years or 12 years, I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm currently here, but I'm coming back home on Friday, and I'll be in South Africa. My second son will get married on the 25th of July, so there is a bit of a purpose to that. But it's also good to go see my parents and my wife's mum, and and I'm in time there for the Scotland game on Saturday. So it's a good journey back before we start up again the 3rd of August.
Well, it's the perfect segue for me. Sorry, Grania, just to quickly ask you. Last time we spoke to you was the evening of your other son's wedding, and now it's your second son's wedding. So there's a trend going here.
Yeah, I'm just. It was quite challenging. I don't know if now it's out of the way, I suppose. But it's good. Last year, I was concerned that John would also make the next step to come and play at Benetton. He decided, that his wife to be and him are together already since they were at school. It was the next step for them, and he preferred to come here as a married couple rather than him or them separately. So compliments to him for that perspective, staying true to the principle. And so yes, they will get married, and then hopefully, I told my daughter she must wait now until
we invite you again
every year. We can't do it every year.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Congratulations to them, Franco, and wishing them health, wealth, and happiness. I'm glad you brought up Italy, because it is something that I'm fascinated about in your career, because I was thinking about you, and it's this, and I know I am referring to a sort of almost a stereotype, but I think you embody that ordentliche Afrikaans man, and then you go to Italy, and it's so flamboyant and Latin and emotional, and we know Italy very well in Ireland because we come up against them every year in the Six Nations, and people like Michele Lambero, who speak so well and communicate so well, and the new Italy, but yet met Dice Spielers Boer. You turned that soil and you watered it and you tended that field. And I feel like you have an almost fatherly feeling for that current team, that Italian team. And I know it's reciprocated. I know they love you too. And here you are, you've kept the house in Italy. Your son is married to an Italian. Talk to me about that love, that true two-way street of love between you and Italy.
Look, it started in '94. I came out and played in Modena for a season, just as an amateur. We were just two foreigners at the club. I had to learn the language. I learned the language phonetically. So years later, I only realized that some of the things that I was saying were 3 words and not 1. But I think that the culture was important for me, coming from the South African Afrikaans environment. It was such a shock to the culture system that I, had to. It was go with the flow or get left behind. So, I love the history. I'm a part-time historian, so I love the history part of it. To walk in a city that's 1,000 years older than South Africa, it makes it. It was different, and that I think wasn't originally that intrigued me. And then I always said, I would like to finish my career in Italy, just because I thought it's a great place. I came up to see Benetton in that period in '94, and Wayne Smith was the coach back then here, and we spoke, John Kerwin and Craig Green, Michael Liner, what they were all about, and I just thought it will be a good place to come back to. Then when the opportunity arose, I came back for a stint in Bologna just to do a bit of coaching. I wanted to, and it was in the preseason of the Super 12 back then still. So it was just a brief period that I came across, and not the best experience. But then obviously at the end of 2002, when I came to the end of the career, this opportunity came about. So yeah, that was the rugby playing side of things, and that actually just, I was the assistant coach with Craig Green here as the head coach, and yeah, I just fell in love with it. And then in 2008, when I went back to South Africa, Rassie asked me to if I would be his assistant coach. I just had one season left here, and he asked me would I be the assistant coach for the first Super Rugby campaign the Cheetahs were going to be involved in. That was 2006. So I was still meant to play 2006. Benetton, they allowed me out of my contract, so I went straight into coaching. And I did 2 years there. And the evening that Rassie in 2007 resigned from the Cheetahs, the very next morning, we were down in Queenstown in New Zealand on the rugby tour, on the Super Rugby tour, and I got the opportunity to come and coach here as head coach. The very next morning, I didn't. This is not. I'm not making this up. Rassie resigned, or told us as management that he's going to resign at 8:00 the previous night. That next morning at 4:00, I got the call because I didn't yet know where I was. So they called me at their time, and we were down in Queenstown. So it took a bit of thinking, and then I decided to come back to Italy and then coached 7 seasons here. And in this whole time, my children went to the Italian schools. We made Italian friends. We obviously, if you have kids that plays the junior game, you get to know a lot of people. And then that was the first part. And then when I went back in 2016 and 2013, then like I explained before, and then in 2019, Conor O'Shea called me, and Francois Shawnee, who that was here, and said, would I not come back as the head coach? He's going to move into performance director's role. And I said, yes, I would love to come back at that stage. So came back in here, and then found the place a little bit disjointed, end of 2019. I came back with a mindset because in 2013 when I left, we went from a 1 international base, 2 internationals, and when I started there, through the help of Pro Rugby, we became 25 internationals at Benetton, and I still thought I would find that group of players here. That was obviously 7 years later. A lot of them finished at the 2019 World Cup, and so we had to start over in 2020, and I realized that the player development pathway was done wrong here because the 2 franchises all aimed at winning in the competition in the Pro 12 back then. They just wanted to end further up the lock. There was pressure from the pro management to get them up to next level. Benetton was losing against Zebre, and they were at the bottom of the table for a couple of years. And I came in here, and suddenly I had to pick 13 under 21s into the Six Nations. The COVID happened. COVID hit this place really hard in the sense that the flats are so small where these boys live, and so we had to reconstruct that in a short period in 2021, end of 2020, and then 2021 in the Six Nations, and then at the end of the 21 season, I said to them, look, I can have a better influence if I get to work with it and put the blueprint down for the clubs to work in than as a national coach. In a test match environment, you need to win. And we're not going to win with the young boys as they were. And that's when Michele Lamara was introduced, and the Garbizis, and all of the names there. Everybody there. Now I see they've all played 50 tests. And when I left in 22, I said actually to them, Italy will have in 2031 the team with the most caps ever in a competition. Because they're going to they all start at the same time. They will play together and they will stick together. And the new guys will have a blueprint, and the younger players will develop into it. And so yeah, you're right. I'm really proud of the way that the Italian rugby developed. I'm not saying that I've had all the influence. Obviously, a lot of other people have been there. I was that guy that had to start at the bottom and had to be brave enough to pick the the next generation in a very difficult period. I've been asked by a television presenter, how difficult is it to practice defense in a test match week? And I was actually really embarrassed. If you stand in front of the camera for a rugby program that you didn't have anything to do with, and that's when I decided I will roll up my sleeves and see if I can't get a blueprint or a rugby program out in Italy.
Look at them now. Nobody wants to face Italy anymore.
I think they went over a little bit of a speed hump this weekend against Japan, to be honest.
Yeah. Talk about speed bumps. Let's move to rugby a little bit, because that's what we're really interested in as well, is the Scotland actually managing to beat Argentina in Argentina. And of course, this weekend coming up to play against the Springboks. Now, I wanted your opinion on the Springboks side that Rassie selected. Is it a bit of a thumbs up, or a bit of a showing the finger kind of a thing to the Scotland team? Are they underestimating, or do you think this is a proper test side that's good enough to beat even a Scotland, even one that's beaten Argentina recently?
No, look, Emir, I think South African rugby has got so many layers of good players. Again, there's not one player that will not step up to the plate there. Even Juan Venter's inclusion, having played in Scotland for so long, he must know. Rassie, with the reason that he knows Zander Fagerson so well, and he would like to prove to Zander that, and he would like to prove to Scotland, that this is what you're missing out on. And all right, Juan, show us now, I suppose, what you're about against the Scotland team. So I think he's picked the team clever. I think the fact that he's announced it early, he would have the freshness is going to be so important for them, in the sense that they know that travel from Argentina back to South Africa is not easy. Haven't done that themselves. The 6-hour or 8-hour time change will obviously make a big difference. He knows Scotland must travel back. He's picked a fresh team that will be eager to prove that they can play in the rest of the champions. If you look at the Springboks' schedule in the next 4-5 months, it's massive. So they're going to need the depth. These boys all want to play in the important games. They're going to put their hands up. It's a real honor, always been a real honor to play for South Africa, but the competition is now so big that everybody in the team wants to prove that they can play that often and that they can be the best in South Africa. So no, I think apart from having a big depth in squad, the fact that Scotland must travel and will be not as fresh at the back end of a long season for the Scotland players, I think Rassie was very clever in the way he's picked the team.
Well, we've come to know the Scotland players now, because Glasgow is one of the grown into one of our traditional rivals. It's actually becoming one of the games of the year when Bulls go play Glasgow or the Stormers go play them. But talking about this team, Finn Russell was playing. What are we seeing there? What players do we have to watch out for in the Scotland team? The ones that because you've been coaching most of them. What players should we keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think Finn will be back this week. I've got no doubt. He will. I think I agree with you. There's variance in the Scotland's performance on the weekend. One, they've lost in the court in the semi-final. A lot of those players, it's the first time back out there. They wanted to perform. I think it's ingredient was there. The second thing, having had to have so much Glasgow players in the team. The second part of it is they were leading Argentina very well at Murrayfield. Then basically got booed off the field after they allowed them back in. So there was so many ingredients in that team to lift their performance. I think they had a good week in Spain the week before. Nice summer weather, traveled across, late, well organized. Again, back to what players, I think it will be the similar team that we've seen. Maybe Zander Fagerson will start and not come off the bench. I think some of the players there put their hand up for more responsibility, but there will be maybe a change at the lock. Gilchrist will probably be in there and the place of Johnny Gray. And so I think it will be important for Sione to play well again. It will be important for, to see a lot of the continuity from the weekend, but with the right freshness and ingredients that is on tour, added to the squad they've put out on the weekend.
I'm sorry to have to bring this up, but you mentioned the semi-final now, and you said they lost, but you've lost. You were also there, and I was watching your face. I was obviously supporting the Bulls. I was very relieved at the end of that match. But talk to me about that experience that you had there, and the feeling of it slipping away. How did you manage with the players afterwards? What was your message? How did you guys get across that, over that?
I don't think you get over something like that, Emia. It's a tough one. We've worked hard all season. We fought back so nicely after our poor performance in South Africa. There was reasons. I mean, it's too evident that we've been leading the table and the stats tables as well before the tour and again afterwards. Obviously, we went through a bit of a period there after the loss in the quarterfinal. Getting people back to fitness, the right fitness levels after the Six Nations, because obviously test match period and the conditioning down a little bit in comparison to what's needed to perform in a club game and the way we play. So there was a lot of work and then obviously with the travel and playing two teams that was fighting to be one to be on the top and the other one to be in the top 8. It was a difficult tour, and we did so well against Ulster. Cardiff, Ulster, and then Connacht in the quarters to get back to that form and that shape. And I thought, so yeah, with 23, when it was 21-3, I think everybody wanted the game to stop right there. I think they realized, that we've done our job, we're playing well. And when I left the changing room at the halftime, I had that feeling as that if we score first, we can get it done, and we didn't. And suddenly we started seeing the Bulls coming in the rearview mirror, and I think we ended up trying to stop them. Our fear of losing became bigger than our will to win and our will and want to win. And it's a difficult thing to understand, maybe for people sitting on the couch or that's not professional players or sports person, and it happens in every sport. It's unfortunately one of those experiences you have to breach. It's gonna bring me back a little bit to just the experience levels of the South Africans, for example, who plays high competitive rugby from schoolboy time. They play. There's 15,000-20,000 people at a schoolboy game, and they understand how to deal with pressure and how to get over it. Where in the Northern Hemisphere, we're not privileged with that. Scotland have not played in the World Cup and the Junior World Cup since last year for 5-6 years. So the big matches that's needed to develop that or as an ingredient to bring that last bit of tenacity out of the players, unfortunately, it must come through experience. And it sounds so hard. I'm not using the words build and growth and development. I hate them because it's not part of what we are at the moment. But it does play a role in the sense that we need to get these ingredients in place. Now, the one thing, Emia, that counted in our favor when we came to 24 was the fact that we did not have expectation. Okay, we didn't bring part of our baggage on the trip down was not expectation. And this time around, we had the expectation. The problem with expectation is you're afraid of disappointing people. And when you have that in your changing room, unfortunately, that it can interfere with best practice. So again, how we got over it, obviously it's tough. We're going to use it as a motivator and obviously an important ingredient. But that again, this is now the last hurdle in my mind. I can't see that there's anything else preventing us from delivering our best performance every week from if we get everything aligned.
Can I scoot across to Scotland and consistency? I'm just looking back at the Six Nations this year. Scotland, obviously, they beat England. They lost to us. Italy beat them. And it just feels like they're on this massive seesaw where they don't seem to be able to get a consistent 80-minute performance. And a lot of those players play for you and are consistent. You were top of the log at the end before the playoff started in the URC. What's happening there? It's a bit like Leinster and Ireland, where Glasgow are the bulk suppliers to the Scottish national team. What's happening? Because you see the opposite in South Africa, where players might have an off game or a couple of off games, but they pull on that green and gold jersey, and it's like Popeye eating a can of spinach. Something extra happens, but it doesn't seem to happen in Scotland.
Yes, so that's it. That is similar to what I just answered before. They go to Italy in the first test match of the Six Nations, a lot of expectation, and they flustered. And then they come back and then that determination, lack of pressure. The pressure's a little bit off. They play for more than just to win the game. England arrived there with, Scotland lost against Italy. England arrived there with a lot more firepower, and then they outplay them. And then they go to Wales, and then that fear of failure sets in a little bit. And if Wales manage that game different, they lose that game. It will put them back on their haunches. They go back. They play with nothing to lose against France, and suddenly they can win the Six Nations Championship. And that's the same that's happened with us, home advantage, and that expectation, that expectancy, and that the fear, suddenly weighs. It comes into the baggage. And again, if they are used to playing with, in those kind of test matches or in those kind of finals so often that the expectation is dealt with before the game. We've tried everything. I built a dam wall with a dry side and a big water mass on the other side, and we have pillars in our game which I then put into this dam, and I tell them, you try and keep these pillars up, that will keep us dry. Keep the dam of expectation, build the dam wall against the expectation. But if there's a little crack, it's sometimes a flood, whatsoever on the other side, if I can use that metaphor to explain what I'm trying to say. So obviously, I don't think it's a lack of consistency. I think the players and the quality of the players never changed. The way they're allowed to play from the opposition's perspective, that might change, or change from game to game. But I do feel, and most of the times, Scotland are their own enemies, that the uncontrollables become too much of a factor in the outcome of the game.
Franco, you mentioned you've got a very good relationship with Rassie. You were asked to move to Cape Town. You've assisted the Springboks before. And there's a lot of talk about your future now. And next year, the Glasgow again and everything else, but you're also going to have more challenges. Probably the squad's going to be made smaller and everything else. What's the future for Franco? Very broadly, would you like to coach internationally again? Would you said you wanted to end your career in Italy. I suppose you referred to your playing career, but would you want to coach in Italy again? What's the plans for you for the future, you think?
Oh, look, no, that's definitely was my playing career, was in Italy. I would love to, coach internationally again. I think my experiences with Italy, in the performance director's role, and then also as the head coach then, and then also my time with South Africa, with the Springboks in between 2016 was very important ingredients for me to understand the whole picture, and also where does the next player come from? I think Rassie gets it right at the moment with the depth and the way he challenges players and from a competition perspective. I think I've spent a lot of time in my coaching years developing players and bringing the next generation through. Even now, with the help, obviously, of my assistant coaches, it's not just a me thing here, but we've brought through so many young players now that's made it. We signed 10 academy players. We only had a 38-man team last year. We brought these 10 players in. We lost some experience. We hope that that the ingredients this year is the right ones. So a lot of competition, a lot of young youth, a lot of players, enough quality players that still want to get to the World Cup in 2027. So there's a lot of ingredients and things that I think I haven't placed to do this, to go to the next job from that perspective. But whenever that happens, that will be fantastic. But for now, I would like to take this next step in with the Glasgow Warriors, seeing that we will have a rejuvenated team. The fact that our age profile went down, but our performance and expectancy went up is a compliment to the rugby program, and I would like to continue to build that.
That was a wonderfully diplomatic answer, Franco. I think the truth is that so many teams will be after you whenever your Glasgow journey comes to an end. I can think of 3 countries off the top of my head who would be absolutely jumping up and down to secure your services. And that's an incredibly wonderful position to be in as a rugby coach. I think you will have, a decision to make about your heart and where you feel you can bring the most benefit. if I'm guessing, I kind of feel almost like Italy is calling you back. You started this current team, and now you've seen them bloom into becoming proper, you know, world beaters on their day. And you still kept that house in Italy. You've got an Italian daughter-in-law. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if you ended up back there after Casada goes.
Oh, I think it's a little early to come back. I think thank you for the compliments first of all, but no, we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I've always let the Lord pave my path, so we'll see. I'll if I look too far ahead, I'm gonna stumble about what's in front of me, and in the end, it's about to be honest, in the end, it's about influencing people's lives. It's about changing the way they would have thought life would work out for them. I jokingly always said to the boys, it's to have a part of their inheritance. I mean, if they sign a bigger contract somewhere else, I'm so proud of them because we've had shares in their future. So I've got a lot of staff that's now started to sign better contracts everywhere, and that gives me just as much joy. Pete Murchie just made his debut for Wales this weekend as their defense coach. So really, really good to see everybody, progressing, and that gives me a lot of joy. So yeah, if whatever comes next, I believe, I'll have a clear idea if something else happens. That would be great.
Okay, Franco, I'm going to be a bit more direct. I want to ask you directly because we know Gregor Townsend's going to, move to Newcastle after next year's World Cup. Would you be interested in, coaching Scotland? All things being equal and all the moving parts, coming together. Would you be interested if the job's offered to you?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I would like to coach internationally again. I think the difference between what's currently the situation in the sense that I've now worked with the players for a period of 4 years. The last time I coached Italy, I literally worked with players that's never played before, and I didn't have access to developing during the season, or aligning them and myself with what I think is necessary to be a performant international team. So yes, I think I know the players well, and I know Gregor's going on. I understand that as well. So yeah, but like again, it will be good to work with his players. So I will obviously be interested, but I mean, it's not necessarily a given that is how it's going to work out.
Okay.
And I think
No,
that's as much as we're going to get from Franco on that.
No, I'm going to push him a little bit further, Franco. You get a call from Rassie and say, listen, I need a XYZ coach, attack coach, defense coach, whatever is available. Where would your heart take you?
Look, I think it's a privilege to coach South Africa, and they've got such a good setup there. So yeah, that is something that obviously it's a different question, but it's not now mine to reason about because it's not on the table. So I think Rassie is he's not in a rush to look at what's going to happen beyond 2028 at the moment, 2027 or 2027 until Tony Brown leaves, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, it's a completely different question.
Don't you think there are more than enough Irish men on the coaching ticket in South Africa, Franco, and you need to bring a little bit more South African balance?
Well, it's a fair comment that everybody says that the South Africans are coaching everywhere. Johan van Graan is doing well. Cornel van Zyl is now at Bath, and Frans Lulik is doing very well in France, and Johan Ackerman is up. We've got Cash was the coach of the season. Dobson's been doing a good job for a long time. So but it's the Irish coaches that's been doing the business in South Africa, isn't it?
Mm.
We're getting there. I don't know how we're sneaking in, but we're managing it.
Okay, Franco, I need to let you go because it's been over an hour. Thank you for that. I appreciate you making time for us. Maybe we can have another chat, closer towards the All Blacks, maybe, because I'm interested to see what you thought about Dave Rennie and what the All Blacks are like. But I mean, it's too early now after one game to see, what they're really up. But I'd love to have a chat with you afterwards. Because also, obviously, when Tony Brown leaves, there's a big gaping hole in that Springbok coaching setup. So you never know.
Yeah, look, Dave coached Glasgow before me there, so a lot of that what he's left there behind is there, and I think he was not treated fairly with Australia. That also had because I know when the landscape is not right, to keep performing at the top end is difficult. And yeah, hopefully now he's settled in his home country in a place where he will be appreciated more.
We're in a time where we've just had this new competition kick off, and it was a try fest in the first weekend. I think 53 or 54 tries. There is always going to be tweaking and changing, but rugby seems to be in a really exciting and good place right now. We had the most incredible Six Nations where nobody knew who was going to win, even on the last day. It must be a great time to be a part of it all, Franco, and to be someone who is as in demand as you are, to be at the top of the game and, being spoken about in the very highest of echelons when it comes to coaching. It's coming from the amateur era, coming from Bloemfontein, making your debut in 97 to where you are now. You talked about God laying out your path. It's an incredible path you've been on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very grateful, and so therefore I must keep on honoring him in every day and how I approach things. And the way that the game is developing at the moment, with a lot of attacking rugby, it comes down my alley, I suppose. I'm an attack-minded person, although defense wins finals, so that's going to be important to see how much of this is going to go into the World Cup next year. Yes, I think you'll have to outscore your opponents. I think in the pool stages next year in the World Cup, there's going to be opportunities to outscore teams, and the attack side of things will definitely dominate. But it will be interesting to see how much the the creativity and then obviously the pressure, how that gets influenced by pressure to win. If it's 7 games in the World Cup, if you win the 7 games, even if it's with 1 point, you end up being the winner. So will it be as flashy in this World Cup? I don't know. I think teams should be able to score tries in the next World Cup. So that is evident in the way that everybody's approaching the game now. And if this brand is going to be able to, or the amount of tries are going to be scored in do or die games, that will be a real thing to see still. But let's see. Hopefully there's enough confidence in every squad to build that brand and identify the right players to make their error rate low enough with the ball in hand so that you can persist with that. I think the temperature will be different in Australia next year, in the sense that it will be more playable, the ball won't be as slippery, so we will not see too much of the weather influencing what needs to be done. So if teams are now using the game time, I think how many test matches are left? I think there's about 12 to 16 test matches left before the World Cups next year, and they're making use of every minute to install a certain brand that they think they can use then, or a point of reference from which they can move away if they need to win and to play different. So yeah, it's interesting to see what this, and I think the fact that there's finals like approach into this Nations Cup makes it a little bit of a preparation going into the World Cup, also to see who maintains the brand that's currently played.
Okay, just in closing, you said you'll be in Pretoria this weekend. Are you going to be watching the game, going to Loftus, or be watching on TV?
No, I'm going to be on television. It's better to see all the angles and be closer to the game. There's always, when you go and watch a game live, sometimes you miss an opportunity to see something again. And so no, I'll be back home. I think my flight is back home to Bloemfontein lands at about 1:30. So hopefully I'll be in time to see the game from home in Bloemfontein.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I appreciate you making time for us. And like I said, I'll hopefully do it again soon. And I'm not sure you're going to support this coming weekend because you've got lots of Scottish Stars there. But I suppose in your heart you'll secretly support South Africa.
Look, I think pro coaches don't support anymore. But obviously, I still love my country and really proud South African. But so fortunately, they don't have to choose a side this week.